So I'm going to do. So hello and welcome to everyone who is joining us today. I'd like to welcome very much David Balen. Hi, David.
Greetings all.
I'm Rosemary Farrow. I'm from Think Tree Hub. We're a professional association for the entire health and wellbeing sector, and we particularly are interested in supporting trainers and also getting cutting edge training out to the world. So today, as I said, we've got David. David, I've known for quite a while now, haven't I? I mean, years really.
Yeah, feels like eons.
David is Chairman of Balens, which is one of the largest independent insurance brokerage firms for health and wellbeing professionals in the UK and the Republic of Ireland, and it's a third generation family business. You just really can't get away from it, can you?
You couldn't make it up, could you?
You couldn't make it up, no. Just bear with me as I've just gone back on my page. That'll be a second. Yeah. So I'm trying to be really high tech and not printing stuff out, and sometimes it backfires on you, is all I'm going to say. So, he's a trustee of 3 charities relating to CAM, and he's also chair of the College of Healing and a trustee of the Confederation of Healing Organisations. He is passionate, and I really do know this person, he is passionate about the benefits of natural medicine and is seeking to facilitate metadata on research. And we've done it again. I'm going to print stuff out in future.
Never mind. Let's lurch into the
What are we going to do today? So many of us, as we said, we're trying to find a new normal amidst COVID-19, and we know, and we certainly know from a number of forums, that people have rightly got questions about the insurance, what cover might be in place to help with businesses being closed. What about risk management? What about if your premises are unoccupied? What about shifting your practices online, sessions, classes, tuition? It's all a big question that people have, and sometimes it seemed that people are having difficulty finding answers from various kinds of insurance backgrounds. And as we know, insurance cover does vary very much from provider to provider. So with that in mind, what I'd like to ask David really to do is set the scene a little bit with the insurance, the whole background to the situation, so we can get a bigger picture, and then drill on down to the questions that are really important to you. Now you will see either at the top of your screen, the bottom of your screen, depending where you are, whether your laptop, iPad, phone, that there is a Q&A box. So if what you could do is just pop your questions in the Q&A box. If you can't find it, put it in chat. We'll answer them anyway, but ideally put them in the Q&A box, and we will endeavour to either to answer as we go along or to answer at the end. So with that, over to you, David.
Right. Well, hello everyone. Welcome. Interesting times on the planet. I suppose from one philosophical point of view, you could say that nature is doing something, and certainly there's a hell of a lot less pollution on at the moment, although a lot of tragedy going on, which, you know, of course we all empathise with. I'd just perhaps like to pick up a passing comment that Rosemary made just then in the introduction, which is that there's a vast differential between the different types of insurance policy causing the confusion. Actually, in terms of certain classes of business, in particular contents related insurance, you know, there's a fairly general consistent type of wording that is out there, and it only differs in mild degree. And particularly with regard to the business interruption, which I know some of you may be quite interested in, having had to close down. And so I think what I'm going to say to you today will probably be a mixture of interesting, there may be some disappointment because I may not be telling you stuff you'd like to hear, but I think it's important to get some clarity, and also, you know, having dealt with the negative public image that insurance has had since I joined it in 1970, having been a musician and then being a yoga teacher and into healing and stuff. You know, one is very aware that there's always been this negative thing around insurance. This is, well, they're insurance companies, they're going to try and get out of paying if they can. And I think I have a mixed response to this, having been in the business now, 50 odd years? God, seems like a long time, feels like a long time. And that is that it's a mixed feast. You know, I've seen stories where people's lives and their businesses have been saved, people that have been rescued from potential tragedy from, you know, the insurance, and the converse, people, you know, dumped and feeling terrible about it. And I think the bottom line is that insurance is based on trust, but it's based on contract, legal contract. And the deal with a contract is that it's a deal, and it will define legally what it will and won't cover. And insurance companies are commercial entities, and they have reserves, which are dictated by law how much they can reserve. So clearly, they're not going to say we will cover anything and everything, because they can't cover what is not known, because they can't reserve for it and they can't charge the appropriate premium. So something like a pandemic is not something that anyone can reserve for or know the extent of. And indeed, any of you look on the Association of British Insurers website, they're saying quite clearly that this sort of cover for loss of profits, business interruption, which I'll talk about a bit more detail in a minute, actually isn't something that is normally coverable. Extremely rare, if at all. So, you know, that's, I'm afraid, the negative news. We can talk in more detail about that in a minute. That's the whys and wherefores. In terms of your malpractice policy, and we'll come back to premises in a minute, the situation is much more straightforward. You know, you've got to follow, I think, the social distancing rules and all the rest of it. Some professional bodies have been saying to their members, you have to close down, you can't treat. That's obviously mainly to do with the contact therapies. Having said that, the osteopaths and the chiropractors, if there are any of those of you out there, have in fact got dispensation as frontline therapists to actually carry on treating, obviously observing due hygiene. I would be very happy, and I've been banging on about for a while, well, why doesn't the CAM movement, why can't they offer themselves to the NHS to help in some way? And certainly those of you that may have been coming to our annual CPD conference in May at the NEC, which has been postponed, we had Michael Dixon, who was the guy who's he's the head honcho at the College of Medicine, very connected in with the NHS and the Prince of Wales's Trust and all the rest of it. And he was saying that he's been trying to, because of his social prescribing is the big thing that he has been spearheading. And what he wants to do is get more and more natural and well-being practitioners, I prefer to call you rather than CAM, involved in the social prescribing network, because there's a real role for you there, I think, and a way into the conventional mindset, which at the moment always seems to be piecemeal. So I think there is a role to play. Certainly I've seen clips around acupuncture and the role acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine has played in China, believe it or not. We don't hear much about that in the media, do we? But apparently one of the hospitals that was put up very quickly in a few days in China to deal with these cases, one of them was a TCM hospital. And in fact, a lot of the doctors in China are trained in TCM and in conventional medicine. And they've certainly found, I don't know how the numbers stack up, but they've certainly had good results with it over there. And I'm hoping that somehow, somewhere, you know, the NHS will start to allow, you know, other disciplines in, but, you know, we'll just have to wait and see. So in terms of your policy, there's no problem with it. we've got agreement with the insurers that if you're doing any online work, so that, you know, for example, if you're not, you know, therapy that involves face-to-face, one-to-one contact, you know, like nutrition or homeopathy or healing or any of the stuff that could theoretically be done online or distance, you've got cover for that, and there's no, you know, there's no restrictions on it. The only thing I would just counsel you on is that policies all have what we call territorial limits. So they say, well, where is this work taking place? I can't speak for other insurers, but the Balen policy is pretty wide. It's worldwide, but it does exclude USA and Canada for obvious reasons. You know, if you do work in those areas online, then please ask us, because there is a premium to pay, because there is an increased risk dealing with USA people. Bottom line is they tend to sue, and to sue outside their jurisdiction, not just in the US. So worth getting that checked. So that I hope takes care largely of it. I mean, we have been asked things like, you know, what if I give someone COVID? Am I covered under my policy? That's a tricky one to answer, because it depends on the circumstances. If you knew you had COVID, for example, and you carried on treating someone, well, I mean, that's history really, isn't it? Now we've got social distancing. But I mean, if you did, if you worked in against the common good, if you deliberately did something knowing that you could harm someone in some way, that could be a general breach, you know, of the spirit of the policy. You know, it's like we all have to use best endeavours, and the policy is there to pick up things you accidentally might do wrong, not intentionally do wrong. I hope that clears that up. In terms of if you're doing training online, that, again, we are allowing that to take place. But Rosemary and I were chatting before we went online here about this, and there is something really about standards that have to be maintained. And I mean, the reason we don't accept online courses per se for, you know, new insurance is because some of them, in our experience, don't have practical. They don't have face-to-face practical, and they don't seem to have any rigorous, resilient way of testing people. You know, with some of them, I was aghast to hear that, well, you know, it's almost like a quiz, and they can keep the textbook open when they're being tested. So there has to be, from my point of view, in order to qualify people, I mean, we'll cover you for doing the course, but if you want your graduates or you know, professionals covered afterwards, then they're going to have to be deemed competent to be let loose on the public. That's always been our stance. We know there are other insurers out there. You're very welcome to contact them, but we've always tried to maintain a position, because the other thing is the outside world looks at what we do. It's a bit like me being outside the world of insurance and then in it. You know, I'm sort of inside the world of therapy, and I'm also outside of it. And the outside world looks in, you know, and they still largely think of us as a cottage industry. I hate to use it, but, you know, Dave Peters, who's a very eminent guy, this was the phrase he actually used it, and I was horrified. But yeah, in the conventional world, you know, where's the evidence to prove that what you do is right or it works, you know, which is what's driven me towards what you were saying earlier, you know, trying to get a way of capturing qualitative outcome data in big numbers, in, you know, public health type numbers that will start to sway the argument. But anyway, I'm rambling on. I told you I might. Sorry. Let's get back to the topic.
I've got a few fairly specific questions. So,
yeah.
So one of the things which had come up, and I think I mentioned to you, is people talking about what happens when I have to leave my salon closed. It's empty. Okay. There's nobody there. What on earth happens? Am I covered?
I was going to go back to that when I came back to the premises. So I thought I'd get the easy bit out of the way first, which is the malpractice. Okay, so let's focus on premises. I think the first thing to say is that when you look at insurance of the property, what they're doing is they're covering things that historically have happened to people, like fire, like lightning, explosion, storm, water damage, accidental damage. All those things, they have actuarial statistics which enable them to price and to cover. And that's why you get fairly standard wordings for premises insurance. Household insurance is the same. They're all pretty standard. You might get little tweaks and bells and whistles, but the core of the cover is the same. So having said that, there is a clause there are clauses in these types of policy which are called the unoccupied premises clause. And this is not a lot of people know about, but you need to, because in normal times, if a place is left unoccupied for 30 days consecutively, then the cover drops right down to fire, explosion, an aircraft dropping on it, which, you know. So what we've managed to do with our insurer is we've got that extended to actually 2 months. And my guess is that we may need to extend it further. My advice from a risk management point of view would be, if you own it or you've got a long-term lease and therefore you can't move out of the thing. And anyway, you know, your businesses can be very place dependent. So having that place there is important because you build up the goodwill and the knowledge. So, you know, you will probably want to keep it. Now, as I understand it, the government may be helping with rent. As I understand it, the government may be helping with employee wages, and they may be helping with profit. But as with everything with the government, there's always a process to go through, which will probably be quite tedious and quite detailed. May not be immediate for self-employed people and businesses. And as I understand it, with some people, because they haven't had, you know, a full year's trading, or there's some other condition hasn't been fulfilled, they can't get their hands on the money. And it wasn't really helped by the Chancellor some weeks back saying they would lean on the insurers to pay out loss of profit claims. When you look on the ABI website, they're saying, well, no, we don't cover that sort of thing for pandemics. So there's, you know, everyone is in a new situation. I think we're all trying to find, as you said earlier, a way of being with this that all makes sense. And at the moment, there's understandably a hell of a lot of emotion, fear, you know, anger, frustration, all those things are going around, quite understandable. So I think what I would say, coming back to this unoccupancy thing, is that you need to, I would say you should regularly go and visit the premises and check everything's okay. Make sure, I would say, if you can, that the water is switched off, or if you've got heating there, that it's on a kind of a low anti-freeze setting, so it will kick in when the temperature starts to drop anywhere near 0. Make sure it's locked, obviously. Although crime has dropped, there is still crime still happening. I would also, I think it's probably wise to remove anything valuable from there, like if you've got laptops or anything that's reasonably portable. I think it just makes sense, and you've probably already done it, but I'm just saying it in case it hadn't occurred to you to do something like that. And that's just all really, risk management is really common sense. It's kind of thinking into situations and using your imagination rather than saying, oh, well, that can't happen to me, and, you know, blah, 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 and that's what the insurance is for. It's, you know, even if insurance pays out a claim, there's always hassle involved, because you're going to have to substantiate to someone not only what has happened, is it covered, but also you've then got to substantiate the quantum. In other words, how much? So, and there's always the stress and the time these things take. So anything you can do to mitigate the possibility of it happening has got to be worth it for your own peace of mind, really. So I think hopefully that covers the unoccupancy thing. I don't think there's anything else really premises related I can think of, other than making sure it's all fully locked, or if you've got an alarm, make sure the alarm's working. Just little things. The water, I think, is worth doing, because if you're not around to see there's a drip and then it suddenly becomes a flood, there's nothing more horrible, as we know from the recent floods that happened earlier this year and the disruption it causes. That, you know, if you can avoid that happening, that's very well worth it. I think probably enough on that. Yeah,
I think so. So, and as I said, so if you are with Balens, then you're covered for 2 months.
We've got.
If you're with a different insurer, then you do need to ask them.
Yeah, it could be they're only giving a month. That is the industry standard.
Yeah. So you need to look at your individual insurer and ask them specifically about the unoccupied premises clause.
Or if you've got the policy handy, if you just rifle through it, it's probably under general exclusions or conditions.
Oh,
there'll be something that's headlined that says unoccupancy.
Okay. Now, Tina Rogers actually said, we've been told to close by Trading Standards, who we get our massage license from. Then she says, do we need to wait for them to tell us we can work, or will insurance confirm? Or are you going to say to do with insurance?
I wish we were as all powerful as we could say, go back to work, because there's a bit of me that would say, go back to work, but I'm not supposed to say that. It's not politically correct. It's difficult, isn't it? It's a catch-22. Wouldn't it be good if we knew who'd had it and who hadn't had it, who's got it, who hasn't got it? It would make these sorts of decisions much, much clearer. It's not, I'm afraid, up to us to tell you. We are saying the cover is there. The problem that you have is that there is the lockdown. And although it's not being passed in Parliament as a law, so you're not technically criminally breaking the law, I would say it's probably against EU law, you know, that kind of human rights and the and also that other thing that isn't written in case law, but which is about, you know, I've forgotten the phrase for it now, but it is to do very much with common sense and with the common good and that kind of thing. And that, I think, operates, it's not bound in any legal contract, but it kind of operates in human society. So I think you've just got to wait for those guidelines. If you're a member of a professional body, some of them are issuing guidelines. Clearly, once there's a vaccine, then you know, that'll make things clear. The problem we've all got is we are in new territory, certainly in this generation. No one knows how long this social distancing thing's going to last. You know, wouldn't it be nice if there was a mask that meant that massage practitioners and others could work on people without fear of passing it on and or getting it? My guess is human ingenuity and creativity is such that if this goes on a hell of a lot longer, people are going to come up with some sorts of solutions or workarounds. But I'm not sure you can do a massage through the post yet or by internet. It would be lovely, but you know.
Yeah. Yeah, she says once the lockdown ends, but again, that doesn't mean that those businesses will be given a green light to go ahead. So, in fact, I know Jane Bryan has said that in Spain she thinks that, say, the wellness industry and I guess hairdressing and beauty is probably going to be the last industry permitted to go back.
Well, it was certainly the first when Boris announced his, you know, he called them beauty parlours and stuff, which was a little bit quaint.
Massage parlour, I cringed. Who did not cringe? I mean, I have no words to explain that, David. Why?
Bizarre.
Why?
Well,
I don't even answer.
But it doesn't it show you how out of step they are with what we do, and how uninformed they are, and how protected in their cocoon they actually are. You know.
Well, you know, if anybody's got some time, maybe this is the and they feel passionately, maybe this is the kind of informational video or little snippets that they actually need to be sending and doing some good with.
Do you know, sorry, I'm rambling off insurance again a little bit, but I think it's relevant to what we're discussing. And that is that, you know, with Balens, we did a survey of, or you may have taken part, I don't know, but where we were asking people about their practices, you know, how long they took them to qualify, how many people they see, is it by recommendation, what sort of amounts do you charge, all those basic questions. And this was as a result of a dearly departed chap that, what's his name now? The professor that died, that was very much pro compliment.
Oh, the one at Southampton.
George Lewis.
Yeah.
Sorry, my brain cells. I think being stuck in
not good,
in confinement is doing my head in. But he said, we don't have any data about what you do, he said. So we did that. We got 3,000 replies, which wasn't bad, although we've got 80 or 90,000 clients. So, you know, I would have liked to see more. But when you extrapolate the figures upwards, it's quite clear there's at least 500,000 sessions going on a week, wow, which the NHS and the government don't know about, or they were up until this point anyway. I mean, that's a massive amount that's taken off the NHS and the conventional systems, and or keeping people away from those systems as well, and keeping them healthy and well. So, you know, I think they're going to ignore our sector at peril as time goes on.
Yeah, and I mean, I've certainly seen, again, sorry, we'll get right back with your questions. I've certainly seen it does come back to running and providing services, people who are really struggling with their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, at least one report of a tragic consequence of that.
And stress, I mean, come on. If there is even one mini bottom line you could say about the health and well-being movement, it's helping people with their stress, and and people that are lonely or need a therapeutic relationship, rather than a kind of hello, how are you today, what's the weather like kind of conversation. So I mean, there's immense stuff that our people do. And oh well, anyway, let's get back to insurance. Shall I lurch into the dreaded loss of profits, so-called section, business interruption, or
I'll come back with your further questions. Yeah, loss of profit, brilliant.
Okay, so look, the difficult news that we've had to tell everyone is that the insurers, and not just the ones that we deal with, but insurers generally, are not and have never intended to cover pandemics on their policies. I think the first thing to explain is that what we call business interruption or loss of profits cover or anything else of that ilk is an extension to the contents or buildings policy, and it's triggered by a claim on the contents or buildings policy. And clearly there hasn't been a claim on the contents of buildings policy. In other words, let me give you an easy example. Let's say there's a fire, the whole premises is gutted, you can't use the premises, you need to be working from there because you're a local resource, so maybe your home isn't in the locality or whatever, people aren't going to come to you, maybe you can do some online, maybe you can mitigate some of your loss, but particularly hands-on people are going to suffer from a loss of premises because the fire has made it unusable. If you have a loss of profits extension, and not all policies include it anyway because it's extra money, and also you've got to calculate how much cover you want because it's not an open-ended book. It's usually based on your profit, not your turnover. And some businesses aren't necessarily even in profit, you know, particularly in their first years. So it sounds all very easy and pleasant on the surface. When you dig into deeper, it's not quite so easy. So basically, the loss of profit section will be triggered by the fire because it's damaged the property. And so there's that is a straightforward claim. Where it gets a bit woolly and difficult to understand is they have a defective, what's the word, a denial or loss of access to the premises. But again, it's supposed to be caused by an insured peril. And although they have some policies have an infectious disease clause, I think ours does, but it's again industry standard. They either will define what they're covering, which is very limited, or it's dependent on defective sanitation, which you couldn't really say is inability to social distance means you've got defective sanitation, because it's what do the words mean and what's the intention behind the words. And I have no doubt that they will be legally challenged. They will rely on the fact that you can't be mis-selling something that isn't sellable in the first place. So I suppose there's a logic there. It's not a good answer for people that are suffering. And I spoke to a lot of people that are suffering, and my heart goes out to them, but our hands are tied because it's industry standard interpretation. Having said that, and rather than boring you with all the details, on the ABR website, they go into it in some detail. We've gone into it on our website. If you look on our news page, there's regular updates on all this. But I am actually challenging our insurers over it. I've said to them, explain to me the legal basis with which you are declining these claims. Because, some of it is arguable. The other thing is, will the government lean on the insurance industry? Because they know now that having said, we'll make sure it's covered, they probably now realise that was a bit of a gaffe, because it's not covered. So they could lean on the insurers and say, you have to pay this. But meanwhile, people are going out of business and they're suffering greatly. Everyone's suffering in different ways, folks. I'm not asking for any pity, but it's very difficult in these times to see the wood for the trees. Bottom line is, it's not coverable. Someone once said to me recently, they said, well, what about force majeure? FORCE. In other words, things. And actually, what I said at the beginning of the chat was, they won't cover things they can't know about. You can't insure for something that you don't know about. It's almost like force majeure. Well, we're being invaded by aliens. You see what I mean? It's like you can't think into situations that don't have a history that you can cost out, and that is the problem with something like a pandemic. Well, that's their position. As I say, I'm challenging it. I'm asking if they would consider some sort of goodwill gesture. We're not lying down and rolling over with it. Equally, I wouldn't like to hold out a lot of hope. If it comes, great, but the general position of all the insurers is it's not covered. Yeah. That's one of the reasons I think why the government stepped in for businesses, actually.
Yeah. Because if you like, we are invaded by aliens. You just can't see them.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, they're minute.
They're minute. They're tiny. You can't see them.
I do wonder. On a head or something. Is that right? Wow.
Do you think that in the future there will be an option for some kind of pandemic insurance, or it won't be relevant, or what do you think?
Well, I think that's an interesting point. I was chatting it through with Josh, one of my sons, earlier today, actually. The NHS got bombed by hackers, and not long after that, the insurers started to develop policy wordings for cyber attacks.
Yeah,
they become quite popular. Conversely, when AIDS hit, a lot of our malpractice insurers, in fact, still, any of the nerds amongst you who like reading policy wordings may find lurking in the exclusions that we're still excluding AIDS and Jacobs-Creutzfeldt disease. Right? Yeah, but I've nailed down the clarity, because before it looked like, well, it's all excluded. What they're intending to exclude is giving someone those illnesses, not treating someone with any of those conditions. But I mean, you know, and that's still the case today, even though there are, you know, reputedly cures, or at least drugs, that retrovirus and all the rest of it, that's still sitting in the policy. So I'd like to think they will be able to cover it going forward, but clearly it'll be subject to terms, conditions, and additional money.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to guess, because this is so overwhelming. I mean, what is it? Over 100,000 people died, you know, all these businesses going bust, all these millions of people out of work. It's it will be
really.
still
Completely overwhelming. Utterly and completely overwhelming. Shall I bring you back to a specific question, David? Yeah. Because Anna was the first one to ask this question. I kind of feel bad that Anna.
Sorry, Anna, you've had to listen to this old git rambling on for about, I don't know how long now, but yes.
Do you know what I love about this is, you've got an absolute face and a human figure, because people are very fond of saying, oh, insurance this, oh, insurance that, and there you are, you're a human figure and you talk like a human. That's what I love. That's
very kind of you. I'll have a word with the laboratory later about getting a new update.
Anyway, Anna, it brings us back to something you were talking about, having online cover. But what she said was yoga teaching online, and that also comes a little bit back to our chat about prior to going online about physical therapies. Although this is yoga teaching online, could you explain what we are and are not covered to do? And I wonder if that is in both a class sense, because you do see quite a lot of online yoga classes, and say yoga therapy one-to-one, because they're probably slightly different, I would have thought.
Well, as an ex-yoga teacher myself, you know, I've never, obviously in those days, online wasn't even available. I would have thought, well, there's no I would have thought. We cover it, so there's no question of what you should and shouldn't do in order to achieve the cover. But I mean, clearly you need to make sure that your students have got mics and cameras on their devices, because you will need some interaction between you. You know, if they're just watching you with some new age music, sending people off to sleep in the background while you tell them what to do, and there's no feedback, I'm not sure that, particularly if you're doing yoga therapy, I'm not sure that that's a wise thing. We don't stipulate in the policy what you can and can't do, by the way, but this is more me just thinking through the situation and saying, I think this might be useful if you did that. So checking that people have got the right equipment, I would, and also, you know, some of these things like Zoom and other systems limit the number of people online you can see. So, and you need to be able to tell people, could you please put your camera a bit this way, because I can't quite see what you're doing there. But I think as long as there's feedback going both ways, then it's a yoga class. The only thing you can't do, obviously, is touch the body, because sometimes you can, as you know, as a yoga teacher, you get a sense of what their body is doing by touching it and putting it a bit more into position. And you won't have that luxury. And of course, you've got a bit of a time lag between what they're doing and what you're seeing. So I think pacing yourself is what I would say is the pacing your communication and giving time for the time lapse to happen is probably worth doing. The other thing that your policy does ask you to do is keep some sort of record. Clearly, it's not the sort of record that a therapist would take down in that sort of detail, but you should make a note of who's attending, and I would suggest you keep some sort of a record, even if you only record it or what have you at your end, of what exercises you did. Because if you're ever challenged by someone, then you could say, well, I did this, I checked you were doing it okay. Or you could even say, well, that person wasn't even in the class that day. So, you know, it gives you a little bit of a defense if someone has a go. It's unlikely, we don't get it very often in yoga particularly, but it has happened. And so to be able to have some sort of record, the policy does ask you to do something basic, really. But it's more from a point of defending you rather than trying to get out of paying a claim.
Brilliant. And I guess the same thing would apply to all the physical training online as well, more or less exactly the same. Do you think?
Yeah, it's yes, but we're calling it physical training rather than teaching a quality.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, what I did actually mean personal training.
Yeah, for sure. Well, in a way, that's kind of easier because it's usually one-to-one or small groups, as I understand it. You know, unless obviously they're doing a class, but. And I think one-to-ones are much easier to manage than doing a class online, I would have thought. But hey, it's a learning curve for everyone, isn't it? Does that answer the good lady's question? I'm not sure.
I think so. I mean, you've basically said you're okay as long as you keep a track of what you're teaching and what you did. Keep notes, basically.
And who was there?
Who was there? Particularly if it's a class situation. We don't know whether Anna's doing it one-to-one or in a class. So Anna, if you can just clarify that, that would be great. On another subject, Megumi Redhead has got a question about aromatherapy product. She said, thanks for the webinar. It's our pleasure, Megumi. She said, I'd like to make some aromatherapy product like balms, roller balls and personal inhalers to give out for free to NHS staff or possibly other key workers who are not my clients, therefore not having their medical history / consultation sheets for them. And she says, would I be covered by insurance? Am I allowed to do that? Do I need to have them tested for stability or some other tests before being able to give them out? And I guess the first question is to assume that, or the first assumption is that Megumi is a qualified aromatherapist in the UK. Assuming that.
On that basis, if she's got a Balen policy, we include what's known as product liability. Ooh. I'm being attacked by noises on both sides. I'm sorry, folks. I'm actually speaking to you from my music studio at the moment, so you might hear some weird noises from time to time. The situation is that we include product liability as standard in our policies. We define it as what you are giving as well as selling to people. So product liability isn't just about what you sell. We are covering any claims if it's alleged that the product that you've given or sold or tested or demonstrated injures someone in some way. So that's the extent of the cover. And we include cover for up to £30,000 of turnover a year for people who aren't actually your clients. So yes, it would cover that situation. Whether what you're offering will meet standards is another issue. And if you're giving it to NHS staff out of the kindness of your heart, you know, in these special times, without making any claim for what it can and can't do, I can't. It's up to those people if they want to receive them in good faith. Certainly, you could say these are. I think the phrase Walida uses traditional remedies, which I think is quite nice in the sense that it implies these are things that have been used for generations, and although they haven't had randomized controlled tests, you know, people have not dropped down dead in large numbers over the years as a result of using them. So my own feeling, there are millions of people out there like me who have habitually incorporated these sorts of things into our lives without caring whether it's past some internationally agreed standard, which is agreed by people that perhaps don't buy into our philosophy particularly much. So I don't personally have a problem. I'm sure that there will be people that won't want it because it ain't a drug and it hasn't been pharmaceutically what's it. But as long as you don't make any claims for it, and say it's offered in good faith out of my knowledge of traditional medicine. People have found that helpful in certain situations. You may not. I think coming from that place with the right heart and the right intent, why not? We're not excluding it. Let's put it that way. The standard, we don't insist on standards as such. Clearly, all policies will have what we call a criminal acts exclusion, which means, well, if you do something, if you deal with a product that is actually against the law to use, that's not covered. But, you know, who's doing that knowingly?
I mean, so the key thing is not to make any claims, call it a traditional remedy, and
it comes from traditional usage, I think, is a fairly safe
that's great
place to come from.
Yeah. Okay, I would have another question on that, but I'll maybe leave it to the end, or we'll have a private conversation on it.
Fine.
Linda, actually, and it's just something she's going to say, she said, you know, the survey you did and you got, say, 3,000 responses, you said, how about you repeat it now that people have more time on their hands to answer?
Yes, we could do that. The only slight problem is the figures might be a bit skewed because people aren't seeing people at the moment, a lot of them. So yeah, but I think just to say on the research front, I mean, what I've been working with Rob Verkerk and Melanie Aldridge of the Alliance for Natural Health, who have been great campaigners for our movement, and we've been trying to develop a software app to cascade out to all, not so much our clients, but the clients of our clients, because that's where we get the big numbers, and that they're the end users, and we want end users to say, this has helped me, blah, 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 or, you know, these are my choices. And we've just literally a few weeks ago, just before the lockdown happened, actually, agreed to move to someone else who's going to provide us with an infinitely better, you know, long-term solution. So it's taking its time, I'm afraid. And I think what I'd rather you did is save your juice and your appetite for filling in a questionnaire for when we've actually got this app launched. And well, who knows, at this rate, could be the end of this year. But that's where we want to put the focus, is to change the paradigm, the thinking paradigm about what health and well-being is, and what solutions are, and what choices people make, and, you know, why do they make those choices, and, you know, to start to be an advocate and get people involved and start to educate the media, who, assuming they want to be educated, of course.
Yeah. Just going back to Anna's question, she said it's a class situation for yoga, and said, do all participants need to fill in health questionnaires before participating? Is it okay to teach people online who I haven't taught in person?
Well, again, the policy is silent on that. So we're not restricting what you want, what you do or don't do. For example, we wouldn't, you know, say you were using your premises in the normal run of events, we wouldn't say to you, well, we're not going to cover you for people you've never seen before coming into your class. I think for your own protection, though, and anyway, to be able to assess the client, because I think it's even more important that they tell you a bit about their health before they come online, because you might be able to suss someone out when they're in the room if you're sensitive and experienced. But boy, you know, trying to do it online, when you're in a class situation where you've got all these other people who need your attention and your focus. So I would think it's a good idea. We don't stipulate that you should do that, so you don't have to do it. But I think if this is going to go on long term, then I think you need a long term strategy to deal with this new world that we're in, because this, folks, this could go on a long, long time, couldn't it? You know, I mean, everyone's saying, well, a few months. It could go on a long time. And also, don't forget, if you've got any clients or patients that are in any of the vulnerable group, as they're calling them, those people could be holed up for 6 months, the rest of the year. We just don't know, do we?
No, we don't.
So I think having a strategy for risk management, and also knowing your client, knowing your patient, I mean, that's the glory of what we do in the natural health and well-being movement, is we kind of know people, you know, from a relationship that is built on maybe half an hour of your time with them and only them. And I think the ethos of what we do is upheld if you do at least have some kind of knowledge about them and some feedback about what changes are going on from the work that you're doing. I think that's really going to be vital in this kind of online world.
That's brilliant. Laura, I am going to ask you a question because I know you've put it twice. Don't you worry, it's going to go. I'm just going to give Megumi's feedback. She says, so amazing to be able to talk to you in person. Insurer with a face makes such a difference. Thank you. There you go.
Do you like my eyebrows? That's my main feature, is my eyebrows. People tell me my eyebrows move up and down too much. It's a bit distracting. Sorry, I'll paint them white next time or something. It's very kind. Look, we're all human beings. You know, we are all in this together. When I first got involved, you know, when I had a serious accident back in 1977, and in those days, you know, doctors were gods. You couldn't cross them, couldn't argue with them, you know. And you know, in my lifetime, I've seen so many changes and things, and it's important, I suppose. It's kind of you to say what you're saying. I'm struggling to have a response that sounds proportionate and reasonable. Let's just say that I've been blessed in my life. You know, I could have died a couple of times, and natural health and well-being has helped save my life. And that so many people, countless people, have been helped by what we do. And I'm just grateful that there's people like you out there looking after people, caring for them, helping them with their process, their living, their births, their dying, you know, all of that stuff. And in many cases, you're unsung heroes. And I've just been grateful to be able to look after people like that. And hopefully when all this dies down in maybe a year or so's time, maybe we can all find what we've learned and move on. You know, life is a continual learning. You know, we never stop learning and experiencing. And, you know, you just have to walk your walk, don't you? Whatever that is, you know. So I would like to thank you lot out there for listening to the ramblings of I'm 72 in September. No, so 72. Really? Yeah. Wow. But I tell you what, have any of you read Autobiography of a Yogi? You should. You know, I've reread it. I'm rereading it at the moment. Paramahansa Yogananda. And you know, when you read of all this stuff that you know, what we think is reality and what actually might be reality, it does put a bit of a perspective on all this.
Yeah. So Laura, I've got your question. So it says, Laura, who I know from down in Kent. Hi, Laura. She says, I'm a hypnotherapist and CBT practitioner. Am I okay to do online therapies, and can I send out my own audios?
Yes.
Easy.
It's probably quite nice for me just to say a one-word answer instead of rambling on. The same rules apply. Keep notes. Hypnotherapy could be quite interesting online. I wonder how that would work. Yeah. But yeah, certainly there's no restriction. As I said, we've got agreement with the insurers for the avoidance of any doubt that clients who are doing that, as long as they're qualified, as long as you make sure you keep some notes so that you've got a record of what went on. It doesn't have to be War and Peace. It can be fairly objective. Client said this, I said that. Client reported improvement. Client said not so good. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be pages and pages and pages. It just needs to cover the story enough so that if there is a challenge, it's clear what happened from your point of view.
Brilliant. Going right back, and actually this comes back to your passion, and what you were saying about Michael Dixon, Dr. Michael Dixon. Liz, who's another friend of mine, also down in Kent, love Kent.
Good place. It's a good place.
Wonderful place, Kent. And she's really talking about social prescribing. She said, I've struggled to get my work into the NHS. Liz does a number of things. I made links with my local social prescriber, but was told I couldn't work with them as I had a business and made a profit. Very
What?
Yeah, seriously, they wouldn't even promote my free events. Now, David, what on earth are we going to do about this?
Would you ask her to write to me in confidence?
Yeah.
I will write to Michael Dixon, because I'm in communication with him from time to time. Had a nice chat with him a few weeks back, and I will put this to him, because he may not be aware that this sort of stuff is going on in his network. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't, because he's trying to encourage people in our sector to get involved. So
yeah.
Sorry to hear that, by the way. That's doesn't sound right, does it?
No, but I actually put an alert just out of interest on a job site for social prescriber vacancies, just to see, because they pop up all over the place because there's a budget for them. So a lot of it is all about signposting to free resources, free this. Yeah. So I'm actually not surprised.
But that doesn't make sense to me. Look, even if you just offered your services as part of your service, as part of your community contribution, that I don't want any money for it, but I've got all these skills. People have report they've had benefit from it. I'd like to offer it. Kind of maybe do a 1 month trial and see what you think, or something. But just to be, yes, no, doesn't sound right, does it? Anyway, if I could repeat, if you could send it direct to me, or send it via Rosemary to me. I know it's a bit long roundabout, but Michael wouldn't be very receptive to stuff just coming from outside his sort of network, if you like. So, but I'm sure I can tackle that. And if any of you, other of you out there on this webinar have had similar experiences, if you could again send it in, I'll see and what the problem or the perceived problem may have been, then I can give Michael some feedback.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very happy if people just want to funnel it into me, which is thinktreehubrosemary@gmail.com, and then I'll put it all together and send it to you in one go. Yeah. So it's thinktreehubrosemary@gmail.com. It's the number it's the email in the webinar. If you've got any questions, so just send it today. So I think we're coming up to closing now. We've got quite a lot of, yeah, I know it's 12, doesn't time fly, David? Linda Duddy says thank you, and she's put lots of clap emojis. I don't know how she did that on the chat. I'm impressed with that. And Melanie, hi Melanie. Melanie's one of the team at St George's who do Connecting Reiki with Medicine, so very much in the interface. Melanie says, grateful for today, both David and Rosemary, much appreciated. And she said, looking forward to Balens annual conference in 2021.
It may well have to go there. Yeah, well, we'd be delighted to welcome you. We're just, it'd be nice if it was later this year, but the way things are going, But yeah, thank you for that. And it's nice to have a sort of an extended family, really, people that come back year after year. And, and Michael, I'm sure, will want to come to the next one when it gets rescheduled.
Yeah. Laura just come, she said, I was about to send an audio to NHS staff within a care package with another company as a free download, and I take it's okay. So she just wants...
As long as you're doing what's described on the policy for which you're qualified, or if you're not qualified in it, you need to refer to us, because some disciplines new. People invent their own disciplines, so we have to screen those. But if it's straightforward and you've got a qualification, then like things you might do, like lectures or online talks or demos or anything that's springing from your qualification experience, we're covering it.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And Tina also says, Tina, thank you so much to both of you for your time. So David, I think that we have worked our way through everything, I think. David, again, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time, coming and put a face on insurers, giving really clear answers. And again, we got another thank you from Donatella. Hi, Donatella. And she says, thank you so much for your time, very interesting. And essentially, I think some of the key ones to go right back, just in closing, is if you are working online, watch out if your clients end up in the US or Canada. That's important. Carry out suitable risk management if you have got premises and they're empty. Just be really sensible about it.
Pop in once or twice a week just to check everything's okay. Turn the water off if you can, because leaking pipes is a big problem when your places are unoccupied, and or keep some very low level heating on a thermostat if you've got that option.
Yeah, you're okay as long as you stay within your scope of practice. If you are teaching classes online, then make sure that you can actually see the people you're teaching, so don't have too many people in the class. So I'm kind of summarising really what you said. And
it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, how are you going to screen, even with some of my 27-inch screens I've got in the studio? I'd be hard put that you need a couple of pairs of eyes to see what everyone's doing. But you might develop those skills. Yeah. Not saying don't do it, and certainly we're not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying, well, maybe you need to think about how you do it, because you want to make it. See, the other thing is you want it something that is easy for people to contact you, and that's going to be sustainable, not just kind of a one, that was a good idea, yeah, but you want something that's going to be a sustainable for your clients, and also from you from an income point of view. So I think it does need some thought.
That's brilliant. And if you are gonna, if you've got a Balens policy, you are covered for product liability.
Yeah.
Don't make claims that are not substantiable. Call them maybe traditional usage or traditional remedies.
Yeah, and don't make any claims for them or say this will cure you of acne or athlete's foot or anything. It's like, and the last thing you want to use is a C word. So, just that these are supportive. You may find it therapeutic. Some people have, some people haven't. There's no randomized control evidence for it, but this is a traditional usage product that people have found helpful over the centuries. I don't think any court of law or anyone can find fault with that kind of approach. Brilliant. I really don't. And if they do, I think you can really challenge them under what's fair. What's fair rather than what's right in law.
Good point.
Natural justice, that's the word. Natural justice. It's a breach of natural justice, I think, to say you can't use traditional remedies.
Yeah, love that.
I have to remember that.
Yeah. So you've got another thank you from Karina. She says, thank you so much, Rosemary and David. As an aromatherapist and yoga teacher, this has been incredibly useful and I've picked up some good tips. And Laura, she said, been very useful and great peace of mind. Thank you to you both for your time. Eileen Sweeney, you'll like this, David, says, thank you. This is why I trust Balens Insurance.
Thank you.
So again, just to let everybody know who's still here, that from Mondays, we're going to start a 30-minute practical weekly wellbeing. So we've got people lined up just to do a 30-minute demo of something. And that's really aimed at people who are isolated, they're socially isolated, and they can just learn something very simple in 30 minutes or less that they can then use during the week, or people with their families. So it's kind of, you're knackered after Joe Wicks. what can we do? What can we do now that is going to lift the spirit? So we've got some great people lined up for that, and look out for our announcements on that, because that's going to be awesome. And we'll
Get more plants in your home and outside. More plants, more gardening.
Maybe we should have a gardening. Yeah, and we'll be back next Wednesday with another webinar. If you've got more ideas of what you want, again, send them to us. And I'm going to finish by saying once again, thank you so much, David, for all your time, your knowledge, your expertise, your humour, your wit. I'm quoting from Claire now. Anyhow.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
It's our pleasure. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Have a good day. Bye.
Stay well. Peace.